So we'll talk about NiP now. Now, obviously, we have barely any results with this team because even though what I tend to typically do is if you only change one player, I usually still just take like the last 3 months or whatever. But if you change this player, like you take out Nork, who's like, a decent player with potential, and you put in like the man that, even though I don't consider it, if you only go by accomplishments, he is the GOAT of CSGO. Like he has the fucking most insane resume ever. And potentially still in his prime if you look at how he plays. So if you had a player like Device, in my opinion, almost no point talking about the NiP before now. We may as well just talk about the NiP from Flashpoint 3 and this tournament and kind of focusing on them. So they did come second at Flashpoint. Quite a bit of a shock, not least since they managed to lose 3 best-of-3 series and still come second. That's only barely a joke there. I mean, actually, the fact the way they played both times against Anonymous, I thought there was no chance they were making this run. So, right, Alan, start me off on this one. What have you thought of NiP so far? A revelation?
In the sense that I didn't think they'd come online this fast with Device, even though a Device, obviously a super high caliber player, and he comes in from a system like Astralis, can bring all those ideas. It was still like, how could you integrate him so quickly when NiP plays so differently to an Astralis? So from that perspective, in terms of how quickly it all came together, and they obviously made it to the finals of Flashpoint, that's a good result. That side was good. I think what people maybe haven't been seeing under the radar is like the ZTR LNZ LNZ swap is a little bit concerning for them, where the roster isn't rounded out like we'd want it to be seeing at the moment, and I don't think it's a long-term option having either of those players in the lineup right now. And certainly if you could get a Fnatic player, I think they would go in that direction. So for me, that's quite concerning. But in terms of how they're playing, they look very, stupid as it sounds, they look very Swedish to me. A lot of kind of defaulty play and playing out the mid round, and it's been very interesting from my perspective to see Device in that sort of system versus an Astralis, which is going to run a lot more set rounds. So I feel like the whole dynamic that they bring as a team now is really interesting, and in some senses they do kind of look like an NiP with Nork on steroids, basically with Device. So I have been impressed so far, but certainly moving forwards, it's about rounding out their game, because at the moment, I think they're really good at playing those mid-round scenarios, but now it's about having all the set rounds, having super good comms on CT, having all the, takes and map control. So for them moving forwards, those are the areas of the game I'll be looking at for NiP.
Right, we'll obviously talk specifically about the players again in a minute, but I will just say as a very brief point to draw people's memory back, don't please overhype the LNZ player. You all did that to ZTR after fucking 1 best-of-3, and now you're all cool that he was just benched completely, and he's probably never coming back to the squad again, unless they use him as some IGL or some bizarre angle they were using. So I already got that vibe, but when he had his first couple of good games, they were already getting ready to hype. So anyway, NiP in general, Mouse Nick, where are we at?
I like how they play. I like how Alan said they play very Swedish, because it feels like they're very reactive. I think they're one of the more reactive teams when I watch them. Like I think the thing right now that concerns me about NiP is that not only were they fraudulent in the sense that they got a rematch against Anonymous, but I felt like a lot of the kind of the win conditions for them, the stats that were good, were so like inconsistent. Like I remember at Flashpoint, over halfway through the tournament, they had something like some crazy like 48% win rate or something in 4v5s, and it was like, that is just the least sustainable stat. Yeah, like you can't keep that up. No one can keep that kind of thing up. So then I think they just got, I guess is the word lucky. Like, I mean, it's just like they just somehow managed to scrap these rounds together. And I mean, you got to give credit to some individuals for that. Like Rez was playing incredibly, and ZTR was overperforming in clutch situations, and Device is Device, so he's going to just sometimes pull some rounds back for you too. But I actually feel like the problem with NiP always for the last year has just been the fact that they've been too reactive and not proactive enough. So I felt like teams could always actually pretty much, the way I joked about this before was that NiP is the team that is my favorite team. If I want to learn about a team, I want to watch them play NiP, because I get to see them run everything they ever wanted to play, and then I just know the style of that team. If I wanted to see what are all of OG's set strats, I'll just watch them against NiP because they get to run them. So I think that NiP have had a little bit of an identity shift, where I have noticed that Device obviously is taking way more initiative than Noct did. So it's like, it's pleasant to see them actually trying to throw out an opening op pick against teams, and it's nice to see Plopsky still playing for a little bit of info in early rounds, enough that he sometimes has to take fights. And Rez has just gained confidence out of nowhere. And I think that's because he was slotted next to ZTR. Like ZTR was kind of just like his bitch in a lot of situations. Like he was the first contact in so many of their little setups. So Rez just gained this supreme confidence out of nowhere just because he got to bait ZTR constantly. And now that LNZ is on the team, I don't know if Rez should be performing as well now. I think he still has some of that leftover confidence, but I don't think that you'll see a Flashpoint 3 Rez here or moving forward, actually.
Yeah, actually, as we know, obviously, let's just talk about the players because there wasn't much results in terms of NiP in that regard. I will just say, if people are wondering about the whole Device angle, one thing I tried to stress when Device moved from Astralis was even though he himself claimed as a motivation, it was the idea that he'd never been the number one player and maybe this is a way to like expand his game or something. The problem with that is, like, at the end of the day, I always say this, your playing style does to some degree come from your like character, like who you are as a person, like how you think about the game, your philosophy. So like realistically, Device is never going to be simple and Ziwu and Nico and these sorts of players just because, not just even skill-wise, like he's a pretty good skill-wise player, but like their skill is what then allows their mentality to believe I can just smash everyone and I can be the 1v9 player. That's never been Device's game, but I won't go the other way as well and be like, he needed Claymore, he was only the Astralis system. Because if you ever saw when he used to play with Carrigan back in the day, they were sort of like a fairly loose team actually, and they were just kind of, they allowed Device a lot of freedom to do what he wanted. He was just a primary AWPer basically at the end, and he was a pretty good player. It's just at the time there wasn't really, I mean, Simple was less experienced, so there wasn't the same like titans the roaming the world, you know, so it wasn't a problem. You could, at the end of the day, his competition back then was like Olaf Meister, young Nico, you know, Cold Zera. These players he can definitely mix it up with. So I will say on NiP, I have found him like a little bit underwhelming because at the end of Astralis, when Astralis was kind of bad, he was still hard carrying them sometimes. Like, you know, he would have like plus 25 series that they would lose. In NiP, I felt like he's been like a little bit more subdued, probably because he's learning the system, working with a new coach, speaking a foreign language. I know he technically speaks Swedish, but it's not the same as thinking in your brain in your native language. So the thing to me about Device at the moment is, it's like, I actually do think that he is going to eventually be a bit like Device from Astralis and be a really, really good player. It's going to take a bit of warm-up time because you're not put into a system in that regard. And I'll also throw in there as well, I noticed a very weird stat, but it's a pretty cool one, which is his stats actually in the small sample size of playing in NiP, when he plays against the top 5 ranked teams, his stats are better. They go way out of 8 maps. He's like way better than when he plays against like a top 30 team. So I'll tell you what, there's one thing that hasn't got. He's a fucking clutch player. This is why this guy's won all the majors.
His stats actually, I took it down when he in the first 3 series he played at Flashpoint, he was averaging a 1.05 against, you know, like the entry level almost group stage-esque games, and then in the 3 BO3s after that, he was averaging a 1.24. Like it's just like he was powering up as the tournament was moving forward and progressing. So the Device, it almost feels like he just kind of was like, let me see how much my teammates can do at the beginning of this, and then I'll actually, when it gets to crunch time, I'll start showing everything I'm capable of as well.
Yeah, I think it's also that for a player like Device, when you're playing the very top level teams, in some senses it is actually easier to read the game because you know roughly what's going to be coming. They all play roughly the same style. Maybe not a Gambit, for example, but let's say the top European teams are all going to do roughly the same stuff. And then when you play the 10th to 20th best team, they're going to come out with crazy stuff, crazy executes, whatever, contacting in all over the place. So for him personally, it might actually be easier just to read the game versus the very top level teams. I think, as kind of Duncan mentioned, is like Device isn't going to be the player to like grab the team by the balls and just say, I'm going to do this. I'm just start calling around himself and try and take over the game. But I think in terms of what he can bring to a team and how, you know, they can build around him, I do believe he can be like one of the best players in the world, even if, you know, it doesn't show in the stats, even if, you know, a Simple or a Zywu are going to be more skilled and have more kind of in terms of how much Device can elevate a team. I still believe he can. You know, the question for NiP is how do you make use of him? What does he bring in from Astralis? But certainly for them, and especially for a sweet team like Sweden, which is really an all for Device's caliber, I don't think you could really ask for a better player. You know, it's been a bit inconsistent. I think he'll play out pretty well for them.
Yeah. By the way, this is probably like Discord, like, so don't worry, guys. Like, there's nothing we can do about it. We'll just keep rolling, right? I don't have like, it's not a team again where I'm going to go all 5 players and go super in depth. So the issue for me with this team actually is I actually think these teams are fairly evenly matched in terms of raw skill, because whereas like VP have like the 2 big star players stats wise, and then the rest are sort of like a bit of a wasteland at the moment. In NiP, it's like they have the one big name, and then in my opinion, they don't really have like a true second star. Like, I do know that unfortunately, a player who is literally like, he has broken people's brains with narratives is like the worst thing to ever happen to Rez's career in terms of reality was IEM Auckland 2017, because every fucking fan, the second he has a good map, it's like, he's back, it's IEM Auckland Rez. Like, mate, that happened once ever, and it's never happened again since. Like, maybe he's had a series like that, you know, like that was where for the whole tournament he was the MVP, guys, as an entry. By the way, a hard entry back then, but like, that to me, that just isn't who Rez is. Like, I don't even personally view him as like close to the best entry in the game. I think he's a pretty decent player, and what's bizarre is in this team, he's even actually expected to be sort of a veteran because of just how many new names they've got. But I want to get the thoughts of you two guys. Like, is there some like hidden impact to him that I'm not seeing? Where are we going on this one with Rez?
Well, when I looked closely at the way he was playing at Flashpoint 3, he was just such a great trade fragger for ZTR, because he got to bait ZTR nearly all the time. And then he just, throughout that tournament, actually pretty much right at the beginning when he was playing with ZTR, he just knew it's almost, I don't know if he's microing ZTR or ZTR is just following instructions, but getting to have a decoy, a human decoy, is always just going to make you just feel like you're on top of the world, because you have great information now. And I have no doubt that ZTR actually comms really well, because he was the IGL for Young Ninjas and he was calling for a while on NIP2. So if it was ZTR that was helping set up Rez, or it was just Rez, being able to play off of him, either way, what looked great about Rez was that he would not only find the refrag, but he would get another one on top of that so consistently, because then he kind of goes back into like entry mode. But since it's kind of like once he smells blood in the water, once he gets that first kill, he's just hungry for more at that point. So he can unleash himself in the middle of like mid round, late round kind of situations.
Yeah, I think Rez, his individual performance is very much intertwined to the whole team, because for me, he's not a player that is going to take control of the game or run his own plays all the time. He's always just going to go with the call or go with the mid-rounding or whatever. So for me, that's kind of what potentially the team lacks. And maybe they get a bit of that from Device, where Device can be very proactive maybe on the CT side and play off his spawns or whatever, but they don't have... Where's the Yakindar on NIP? Where's a player that's going to, bring out an aggressive play and call around himself and say, we're at a really crucial round, it's 14-all, like, I've got a good play I can go for, I've got a good spawn, let's do it. I feel like potentially they lack that sort of player. I'm not sure who it could be. Maybe that's whoever eventually fills the 5th spot could fill that role, but maybe they lack that a little bit. But as I said, Rez is a little bit perplexing, because I feel like he has all the skill set to be a really sensational player. I think his decision making is good. It's just, for whatever reason, it doesn't translate just as much as we'd like. So maybe this is a reason. Maybe it's just from that perspective of we want Rez to be a bit more assertive, maybe a bit more proactive. So I like Rez. I think he's a good player, but he's certainly not at the IM Oakland 17 level in every game. Yeah. So you just expect Rez to be a good player, but nothing. Not right now on the same caliber as whatever the best riflers from all the other top teams.
Yeah, I will say in that regard, he is also technically a fact. You can go look it up, that he actually did have like pretty bad like wrist injury or pain or something. And I know he went through a whole thing where he like basically, it's the equivalent in basketball of like learning your shot again, like doing a different shooting form. He basically had to train himself to not play with like some super fucked up angle on his wrist. So first of all, if you have an injury like that, it could obviously affect like how good you're ever going to be again in your career. And then secondly, if you rebuild your game, who knows what the impact of that is, that you can't comment on that regardless. I will just say, to the point that you said there about like if he had kind of like, cause Rez isn't the Yakindar, that's actually one of the issues I do think they have in NiP. It's one of the reasons why I wonder if it ties into Mousenik's point about how they kind of just a reactive team. Because if you ever look at the greatest duos in CSGO history, they tend to be a super aggressive player and a super passive player. It's like Fur and fucking Coldzera, to Get Right in Forest, Dupree and Device. Like, there's a reason that the mix goes like that. You could even say in the modern day Electronic and Simple, because nowadays Simple kind of gets to be a bit more passive. Like, it's because if you have that approach, like the beauty of the dynamic is it just plays off each other, doesn't it? You cover each other's weaknesses, your strengths combine. The problem in this team is They need like a config or someone. If they had someone like that, now would be a fucking dangerous team. But like, I agree, that's the one area I kind of see them a little bit weaker on. Because Device's game, again, he's not going to go first every time. It'd be stupid to.
Yeah, it's been kind of you don't know round to round if it's going to be Hampus finding initiative or Plopsky as a rifler. And then they actually started using ZTR on set pieces as their entry fragger on top of that. So it is all over the place for them. And that is concerning because even though Counter-Strike is fluid and you don't have to have the most defined roles, it's nice to know who your point man is in a round. It's nice to know who's supposed to be the first rifler that's going to make first contact, or that we're planning to have make first contact. Whereas, you got your lurkers on the other sides of the map, and it's just round to. Yeah, just knowing that, I think, has relieved a lot of pressure off of teams. And it's something that I think kind of in the middle of the online era, when everybody was kind of hitting their little slump in performance and everybody's like, every game feels the same. I think the teams that rose to the top the most were teams that had the most defined roles or had the most just consistent set pieces over and over again, because they knew round by round that, okay, it's going to be Ykinder that's fighting every round. It's going to be Brett. It's going to be Mir, or, okay, we're going to run this set piece. And so playing reactive, like, Fnatic, for example, has just died died as a team because they didn't have the consistent initiatives that they were taking were just were anything but that. Like they were just trying to play their old reactive style where they want to let their opponents make a mistake, but everybody was just running their set pieces using their entry fraggers the way they wanted to, and Fnatic was always on the back foot. And I think NiP is just of a higher caliber than Fnatic is by a pretty large margin today. But they still suffer from the same problem that if they are just super reactive, then the best teams in the world that know how to find space safely and then convert with that safe space are just going to run over them.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.